Well, Liz, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, this is going to be a fun conversation. Thank you for inviting me, Tyler.
Yeah, I'm super excited as we were just getting to know each other, chatting beforehand. We're here to talk about your new book, Impact Players. I don't want to take anything away from that. If there's impact in the title, as this is the Impact Driven Leader podcast, I'm all about that. There's a couple statements you make. I'm like, did she literally read what goes on in my mind or my wife's mind when she wrote this? Because it's so on point. But I shared with you where I first learned about Liz Wiseman was in a book that was shared with me several years ago called Rookie Smarts. And I absolutely loved the book for the place where I was at because it kind of gave credence to this idea of coming in and asking questions to learn more instead of thinking, oh, this is the way it's always been done. And so that's how I got to know Liz. But I'm so excited to talk to you about your new book and everything you're doing with that.
Well, I'm excited that you read Rookie Smarts. I like to think of Rookie Smarts as sort of the smarter, less popular sibling to Multipliers.
Okay.
I think it's a fun book, but not as well known as maybe Multipliers is. So I'm always delighted when people have found it.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too deep into it, but again, as I shared there just a couple minutes ago, I think the idea of and this comes out in impact players. I absolutely see it as an impact player is the ability to have someone to have those attributes of a rookie. And as you talk about in Rookie Smarts it's the person that asks questions that doesn't know they shouldn't ask them, but they're just trying to know more and to inquire deeper. And as we'll get into impact players, and maybe it's something that I enjoyed about, impact players in the book and the idea of kind of this idea of making an impact is understanding that, wait a second, this isn't the way that it really, something's not right here. I need to investigate deeper so I can actually make a difference as opposed to just contributing. Yeah. And, that's how I relate the two. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, and, I think that I'm just realizing this for the first time is I think one of the common themes across my work is about working mindfully.
Oh, okay.
Well, and it's like Multipliers is about being very aware of your effect, your impact on the people you lead, and that you can either have a multiplying or a diminishing impact. And most of the diminishing is done accidentally, like unaware, like, oh, I thought they wanted my help. I didn't realize I was mothering them. Oh, I thought I was cheerleading them, but I didn't realize that I made it really difficult for them to make mistakes. Rookie Smarts is about being very mindful when you are new to something and being like, wow, why do we do this? What do I need to, what does success look like? It's that advantage that comes not from just having fresh eyes, but having a mindful, intentional way of contributing. And I think the impact player framework and message I think really highlights this as well. It's like what happens when you come in and don't just do your job. You are looking at what's important here. Where can I add value? What needs to be done? How can I do this differently? And how can I have impact and not just get stuck going through the motions? And it takes a very mindful approach, not mindful as in mindful. Like me, I've never meditated a day in my life. Like this is my personal hell is meditating all day long. But it's being aware, mindful as in the way you would cross a busy intersection.
Yeah. I think, another term that's pretty popular is an intentional. Yes. Intention, to be intentional about it. I'd love to do this as we kind of start into this conversation. How do you define impact? Someone's listening and they're like, okay, impact driven leader. I have a definition. I'd love to know your specific definition to what is impact.
Well, let's start on the physical side. An impact is to kind of make a dent in something, to change the surface of something, to change the constitution of something. I've got a friend here who's got a wonderful little slogan up on my wall. It's about making a dent in the universe. And so it's to change something. But, lots of people make an impact. But, I think I've been trying to look at what does it mean to make a positive impact on something, to do something that of significance, to do something that really matters, to do something of extraordinary value. That's really how I define impact. And it could be an impact on the business. It could be an impact on the culture, on the team. It can be an impact on the person. And, Tyler, you and I were just talking about people who have made deep impacts on us, like people who have dented me.
Yeah, and I think to me what's exciting about that, and in my ideology of being driven to make an impact, to be driven to make an impact is not being a contributor. And that's what I loved about this, the mindset of the impact player that you have written about and talked about so much in the book is, there's a difference between I'm just going to lead. We talk about multipliers. We talk about, this is leadership. It's like, oh, I'm going to lead. And there's a part in the very introduction of your book, and I'm going to read it. And I know this may make you cringe if some people, they don't like to hear what they've written. But to me, it encapsulated this. And they said, by working with the impact player mindset, you will be a natural for the roles of leading and making a difference. I'm paraphrasing there. You will already be seen as a leader, and you will be practiced in leading through influence and collaborating in a way that multiplies, not diminishes, the capability of those that you work with. And to me, I look at it as a contributor is 1 + 1. I contribute. An impact player is a multiplier that goes 1 + 1 = 4. And that's what in the community that I host, this impact-driven leader community, is talking about that. It's getting in around the table with people and saying, how can we add to each other 1 + 1 but = 4? And to me, it's this idea of everything you've said as an impact player and having that mindset. It's not about me, but it's how can I contribute but maximize the performance of others.
Yeah, and sometimes it's to do the things other people don't think of. You mentioned like getting around the table and contributing. And contributing is good. Like if someone looks at this book and goes, oh, impact player good, contributor bad, has maybe missed what I've tried to make as an essential point. This is not comparing the good guys and the bad guys. This is about looking at the difference between those who are doing well and those who are making a significant difference in the world and in the organization. And, okay, so you mentioned table and food. Like, a contributor is like someone who brings something to the potluck.
Okay.
Like they have contributed. Like I brought cookies, this person brought bread. The impact player is the one who says, you know what, we need a community dinner. Let's gather and get together. That's the impact player. So contributing is good. But the impact player is not just like bringing something to the team. They're the ones that are making things happen.
So one of the words that kept hitting me, and as I read this and reread it and really kind of dove into this book, is to me, and again, an impact player is a collaborator that not only collaborates, but helps everyone else collaborate to their maximum potential. And it really, to me, there's a part of it is being a contributor, I'm adding, but when I collaborate, I make sure that I recognize what you're great at. And I say, well, if I can bring what I'm good at and I can recognize what you're great at, and then all of a sudden we can combine those, then all of a sudden everything around us just elevates. It's, you often talk in the book about football players. I love it because I think the ability to look at, football in particular, I love football, is that you can see a player that maybe doesn't have, it's not the Tom Brady, but it's someone else on the roster that they're making a tremendous impact, and the team would be nothing without them. Not taking anything away from Tom, but yet there's another guy on the team that doesn't maybe show up that makes a tremendous impact because of everything that they're doing. And to me, I love to see that because it's not about them.
Well, yeah, and they're often become role models on the team. They become cultural icons, sort of paragons of what we want from team members. And, they're people who raise the level of play on the team. And it might just be because, well, if we've got this person, if we've got Tyler on our team, we're going to win. So I'm going to put my full effort in because we got this impact player. It could be the person who's just helps bring out the best, which is, okay, guys, no, let's run that play one more time. I know coach said we were done for the day, but come on, let's get that right. It's like someone who's helping everyone just perform at their best.
Yeah. it's someone I think, as we're talking about this and we're going through this and understanding this ideology, I think a great challenge is for leaders to say, hey, am I making an impact? Let's check myself there. But then am I empowering others, whether they're my peers, whether my superiors, whether those that I lead, to make an impact, to go above and beyond that contribution, not saying it's a must or it requires more, but to say, am I recognizing the barrier between them making an impact from just a contribution? And I think one of the great skills, and I think this is a multiplier, is when you're able to say, hey, Liz, and I, recent guest that I had, Ann Hyatt, we talked about this, and I said, why wouldn't you want to be in a situation as a leader where you go to someone and say, hey, Liz, I recognize you're amazing at this. Maybe you don't realize it, but when you do this, everyone else notices, and everyone else just raises their game a little bit. To me, that is the ability of a multiplier to help someone else move from a contributor to an impact player, and that's what transforms all organizations, right?
Yeah, no, you said that so well. I have nothing to add. You said it so well.
Because I read a really good book. I read a really good book that laid it all out, that helped me understand. I want to ask you this, though. If you had to, we talk about collaborator, so an impact maker is a collaborator. Where do you see how empathy fits into the mindset and the, I guess, the modus operandi of impact players?
Yeah, it's about where their orientation is. Okay. And I think it's true for the best leaders. I think it's true for the best contributors, and the impact player is they bring enormous capability themselves. And they're very aware of themselves and the contribution they can make. And, if like you read the book and you see it, you're just like, they're kind of almost borderline annoying. They're so proactive, assertive, take charge. So they're aware of self. They use self, but they don't stop there. Like their orientation is really around others and the people that they serve. And so they're not just like, hey, here's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. It's, what is it that my client is really trying to accomplish? Let's say they're in a coaching role. Like, hey, I'm all about empowering people and I want people to use their gifts. But maybe that's not where the other person is. Like, what is it that they need? And how can I take what I have and my capability and help them with what they need? Okay, I know what I want to do, but what's important to my boss? Like, what is she trying to get done? How do I help her move her agenda forward? And so they're operating with this upward and outward empathy. We often think of empathy as like kind of a downward phenomenon, which is we empathize with people who are, I've been trying to get managers to empathize with what's going on with people around them. But
you and I both.
Empathizing with people who are down on their luck, people who are struggling, people who are hurting, who are wounded, and we're like trying to have empathy for their challenge. But we don't often think about having empathy for the people like above us in organizations, the people that we serve. We're like empathy with the boss, the president, the CEO. Are you kidding? Like they're the ones that need empathy. They get paid a lot of money. They have a lot of power. Why should I be empathetic with them? But it's amazing. Like the impact player starts with this upward empathy and understanding what's important. What are they trying to do? What does this look like from their perspective? What is making their job hard right now? And I wonder if maybe what's making their job hard is me. Mm-hmm. Or all of us. Like maybe the parents are grumpy because the kids are making them grumpy. And, it stops shy of sympathizing with your captor, but it's understanding what the world looks like through another person's perspective. And it is so powerful because we cannot create value unless we understand first what is valued by those we work for.
I love that.
And their lens on value may be very different than our own.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in because we talked about this. There's you have a mutual friend, John Maxwell, and we were talking about him earlier. And this is to that value point, something that I've learned from John, and I've seen John get tremendously emotional. And it's only been in the last a year or so. And when his book, Change Your World, came out, and he understood the extent that values have on communities, on organizations, on all levels of leadership. And one of the things that I recognize through my own practice of it, just by having a conversation about values, you all of a sudden create this common ground that now all of a sudden that's when it allows for leadership to impart. So if we're talking about that corporate executive, right? I'm a mid-level manager, whatever it may be. I'm a sales manager, it doesn't matter. And I decide, from a values point of view, I have a conversation with the CEO, and all of a sudden I recognize that he has the same value for integrity and hard work and caring about others. And then all of a sudden, when I see him doing something out of that, then all of a sudden I say, wait a second, is that a indictment on his values, or is there something else going on that I need to look deeper for? And I think the moment that we start to have that conversation about values, then all of a sudden we can appreciate each other, as opposed to when we don't have that conversation, then we're clueless. Mm-hmm. And as you just laid that out, I think it's probably got to be imperative, if I'm leading someone, for them to make an impact, that we have a values conversation and understanding. And at the same point, if I want to make an impact, I need to really align and appreciate the values of those around me.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, I love this idea where you get these like click-ins, like, wow, that person shares my value, and it allows us to collaborate better. One of the things I learned in this research was how few managers actually communicate what they value. I'm going to say that different than my values, because I'm saying, well, I might value integrity, I might value family, I might value achievement, whatever.
Yeah.
But, so the essence of the research was that I interviewed 170 managers in 9 different organizations, and I'm asking them to identify someone who, kind of fit this description of an ordinary contributor, like a rock solid contributor, not like a barely getting it done, versus an impact player. And, I did all the things I needed to for the research and got kind of mindsets and like mental frames and, value assessments for each of these 2 different types of people. But then I asked sort of a bonus question. Whenever I do research, I do, here's the things I have to do to get my job done. And then I throw like a little extra in, like dessert for me. Yeah. Like it's just really for me. And because I'm interested in it. And I asked 170 managers, tell me about what people do that you love, that makes your job delightful, that makes it like so rewarding to be a manager and to lead people. So it was here's what I love list. And then the next was, I want you to tell me what people on your team do that drive you crazy, that you hate. And people are like, no, I don't have anything. I'm like, think you do. And they're like, well, maybe one. I mean, there's one guy like wrote down 20 things. And then when we got to the end of the interview, this is what I heard so often. Two observations. One would be, when I described that impact player, like I knew right away who it was, but it wasn't until we talked it out that I really came to understand what it is they do differently. Like they know there's like a certain je ne sais quoi, like there's a thing about them that's hard to describe. They just get it. They're the person I turn to in clutch moments. Like I just know if I hand the ball to them, they're going to get it across the finish line. And then they're like, maybe I should tell everybody else about those things. And then the second thing I heard from so many of these managers was, after they went through here's what drives me crazy, but here's what makes my job easy and delightful. Here's what builds credibility in my eyes. I'm like, have you shared that with anyone on your team? No, most of them hadn't. And so, these are and I'm one of these, which is like I'll go and have like pillow talk with my husband about this person's doing this. It's driving me crazy. They're forwarding me all these emails, but yet they never summarize the essential point. So and then I have to ask myself, have I ever told people that what I really appreciate is that when people provide an executive summary, when they send me like long chains, well, maybe I've never told anyone that. Well, surely they can tell because I'm agitated. Well, maybe not. And certainly not in today's remote world. And so part of it is, the impact players are sussing out what is valued here, what is valued by this person. How do I create value? How do I add value? because you can't make an impact unless it's something people value. Otherwise, like, you get these deflection shields for your work. And like, if I could shout on the rooftops to managers, is like, let people know what's valued. Let people know what's important. Let people know what's important now, because most people want to make an impact. They want to make a difference. We crave impact. Mm-hmm. Work is exhilarating when we are doing work that matters. Like, hours don't matter. But when we're not having an impact, when like we keep trying and it keeps like bouncing off the deflection shields, even a short work week is exhausting.
Yeah. To me, to make an impact and to be an impact player is to find work that's fulfilling. And I believe until we find that, we could be in a state of frustration and confusion. And, it's this idea of we're frustrated, we're confused, we find fulfillment again. And I believe to take what you're saying is the impact player goes through that cycle really fast. They know it's a cycle. They know what happens. And to me, it's this cycle, the fulfillment, confusion, frustration. We're going to have that from one spot to another. There's going to be things that come that are frustrating. You just talked about a frustration, right? But it's like, how fast do I process through that to get past that, confusion, frustration to where I can be fulfilled? And I would imagine, if you're talking about conversation you're having to your husband, it's like, this frustrates it. But then you have someone that does it and you're like, oh, why did they do it? And what can I do to help make sure that everyone else gives me that executive summary? It's, oh my goodness, thank you so much, Jana, right, for putting together this executive summary. I love how you do that. That just made it so simple for me. And when you celebrate that, she only does that more impactfully. But then others like, oh, that's what Liz wanted? I had no idea. I was trying to figure out, what worked. And I think that's the curiosity that a lot of impact players tend to have.
They're paying attention. It's that mindfulness and this intentionality. And, here's the beauty of it. You get to fulfilling work faster. See, there's this, big movement. I don't know how many years it's been going on, at least a couple decades. It's just like, follow your passion, find your passion, work where your passion. I think this has been terrible, terrible advice. Here's why. And I'm not saying people shouldn't do work they're passionate about, but for a select few, this works great because they know where they're passionate, they know where they have a passion, and they know how to channel it to a productive, impactful place. Other people are like, okay, this is what I'm passionate about, and they go like, guns blazing toward it, but it's not the work of the organization and nobody else cares about it. And it's like, the team is running. These are people who score an own goal. Like the team was headed in this direction and you just passionately ran and scored a goal in the opponent's box. Like we're going this way, but you are passionately moving in a different direction.
I feel like that's a Ted Lasso episode right there.
Totally. I have someone who's like spots the multiplier diminisher moments in Ted Lasso, and they're like, I'm pretty sure they've woven those in. But it's like that is anti-value because not only is someone not channeling their passion towards what's important to the team, you're like having to keep pulling them back. Like, okay, that's great. We love that you love that. Can we talk about what we're trying to do? And it just drags on people. And then there's the other people who are like, I don't know what I'm passionate about, but everybody else seems to know what they're passionate about. So like, what's wrong with me? And they go through life with this like passion deficiency complex. That's not a real term. I just made that up.
It makes sense to me.
But it's like, I need to find my passion. And they're like, off like consternating over their passion. It's like, I'll tell you how to find your passion. Figure out what's important to the group you're in and go work on that passionately, and you will find a passion. Like maybe finding many passions, like not the passion.
I believe if you follow that pattern, I believe it ends up like a river and it'll wind. And then all of a sudden you open up into this delta and you're like, how did I ever get here? Well, the river started way up the mountain and just wove its way down, but ultimately got there because of the path of least resistance. So as I'm imagining that, as I'm painting this, picture in my mind of if we follow that path, and there's going to be hard spots. And when a river hits a hard spot, what does it do? It makes a turn. It makes a slight adjustment. It keeps flowing. And I believe the moment that, getting back to this passion deficiency complex is when people, I really like that. I think you need to coin that for your next book or some book or whatever. There's a place for it.
Tyler, you and I just did this, so.
Yeah, it's good. Is the fact that when people just say, oh, I'm not passionate, I'm done, I walk away. And you're like, no, it doesn't work like that.
No.
It's like if, I forget who.
In some ways, Tyler, it's like finding your passion is not an epiphany kind of moment where you're like, ta-da, this is what I'm passionate about. We're finding our passion every day. It's like, oh, wow, like that's interesting. I'm good at that. I made a difference. Like, I feel passionate about this work. Like, think of it in terms of a plurality and a continuity. And I think it's a useful concept. But I just think it winds up people who are unaware and they're misguided. And then it creates a whole set of insecurities with others.
Let's hinge on that word. To me, as I believe one of the biggest barriers for individuals to be an impact-driven leader, or an impact player is insecurity. And to me, if I look at a word that describes an impact player, someone making an impact, is someone that's secure. And it really, they found this self-awareness of security and understand, hey, this is where I can make a difference. And I believe as a leader, the more that we can come to grips with our insecurities and understand how they're barriers, and as well we can help others become secure in those areas, that's how they're going to more often make an impact. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like secure in self. Like, like I, in my work with multipliers and diminishers, sometimes people interpret that as like, oh no, you don't want to work for like the genius. You want to work for the genius maker, not the genius. I'm like, no, actually, I'm really okay working for a genius. And I've been able to work with some, kind of genius bosses, but I want to work with the secure genius. I want to work with the person who's like, you know what? Super smart, super talented. Like, I'm talented, I'm capable, I'm smart, and I'm over it. Like, so that every day at work, I don't have to be like, some attempt to prove I'm smart, or, like welled up in insecurities, afraid to raise my hand and say, I'll take the lead on that. Like, I know I'm not the boss, but I'll be a boss of this. Yeah. Like, I want to work with people who are over themselves so that they can get on to the work of the team, and do work that is meaningful and impactful.
And I think in order to be an impact player, and in order to have impact players in your organization, you have to be that secure, humble person, because every one of us has some type of genius, right? And whatever that is, and we can say, it is what it is. Fine. Yeah. But how can we add together? Go ahead.
Yeah. Or, and for some people, like, security comes easily. Like, they're just sort of like born okay in their skin. I probably was blessed with this at birth, which is I've just always been like okay with like who I am. Like, in some ways, like, I'm not afraid to make a fool of myself. I'm not like afraid of the rejection. Like, somehow I'm like, and I think it's because I was born with a sense of humor. Like, that to me is my superpower. Is like, doesn't matter what terrible thing happened. People are always like, well, like, what if something like that happened? I'm like, well, then that would just be a fun story. Like, that, like, I'd be laughing at myself for decades if that happened. So bring it on. But, for people who like don't have that sense of like security, or like, I'm okay making a fool of myself, it's like, just put it out on the table. Like, I find that we are at our best when we just lay out our insecurities. Like, I'm really nervous meeting you, and I'm like going to probably be stammering in the first 5 minutes of the meeting. Like, you put that out there, and like, that person is going to be helping you, not questioning you. It's like, I just think like when we just put them out and then keep moving, it has the same sort of effect of actually being fairly secure.
Yeah, I had to come to grips with that in life. I believe that is the one of our biggest barriers in all relationships, and especially in leadership. And to me, as I read this, as I went through it, as I really tried to find a word that would describe an impact player, is yes, there's collaborator, but I think it's so much they're secure. And they can appreciate who they are and understand, well, this is where I can best contribute. And I think they model that with empathy. And to me, and this is the framework that I've come up with, empathy to me is putting your arm around someone and walking with them. You talked about that earlier, being empathetic to, your superior. And in essence, if you're collaborating, if I'm supporting you, I need to be able to put my arm around you and walk with you, because that means that we're in this together. Does it mean that we're hand in hand? No, absolutely not. But when I'm contributing in that way, I'm making sure that I'm impacting you, and it's not like, oh, you're dragging me. Or at the same point, I can't drag you. We're walking at that together. And I think in this idea of being secure and how I can make an impact, or being secure and how others can make an impact, then I'm not afraid of them overshining my abilities, because I'm afraid of where my place is in the team.
Tyler, something really important what you just said is this ability of we're walking together. Upward empathy, showing empathy for people who might be kind of organizationally your superiors. What it allows you to do is not just like sympathize with your captors. It's not about like, not questioning authority and just like, okay, whatever the boss says, I'm just going to like align myself with the boss, because there are some evil bosses out there. I mean, I studied them. So like, I guarantee you there are evil bosses out there. But what it allows you to do is to operate as a peer with them, because it's like, okay, now you're working with me. You're in like my club, because you understand what I'm trying to do. You understand the pressures I'm under. So join me in this work, and then we can walk side by side. And, if you want to have a peer relationship with people who are really senior, people who are powerful, people who are really influential, that upward empathy is your ticket to do that. And, as you said that, I thought, I think it's been for me personally, it's been the source of my peer relationships with my bosses. I've always felt treated like a peer. I've never felt treated like a subordinate. Like, no, we're just on the same team. So think about like, what is he trying to do? What is his challenge right now? How do I make that easier for him and the organization?
Yeah, it goes back to, the football player, the offensive lineman, who is not the notorious person, is not the face of the organization usually, but yet if he doesn't do his job, the quarterback never does their job. And if he's, standing there and he's like going to block, if he's, in the huddle, and he's like, what can I do to make sure he can do what he can do?
Yeah.
And there's so much of a pure point there, even what age is different, compensation is different, actual responsibility is different. But if we look at that, the team can't be successful unless every person on the field plays their position at the best they can.
Yeah.
And
it's I'm sorry.
No, go.
Well, it's a recognition that you can be an impact player in any role in an organization. And some are on the stage, some are backstage, some are front office. And it's getting kind of beyond the sense of, well, it's only the people who are like the stars on the field and in the highly visible roles that can be impact players. No, because it's about doing work that really, really matters.
Yeah. To me, that's the great diamond in the rough. Is I love to be able to see that. I love to be able to experience that. One of the things that I enjoy doing is coaching my son's soccer team and being involved in his club, and seeing the player that makes the play before the play. The player that stole the ball, that had a great defensive stand, that made the pass, that made the next pass. That person was making an impact.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Tyler, you said something there. It's so, so important. And for every manager, like, this is a very important part because, okay, so I watch a lot of sports, but it's not because I'm a huge sports fan. It's because I'm a mom and I have 4 kids. And, I'm mostly watching the coaching and the sidelines. That's what I tend to watch because I'm watching something totally different. And then, like, I hear people cheering and I look up and I see that someone's done something good. And then you end up cheering kind of the superstar. But to do what you just did, you have to be paying attention to the play. And you have to be watching what's happening on the field. Like, what did the defender do that allowed that pass in the midfielder to get that ball and, like, send it up to where that header from, like, the winger happened? And managers have to be paying attention to the teamwork to be able to celebrate the assist.
Yes.
Not just, oh, yeah, I see the obvious things. Ding, we made a sale. Boom, beautiful product. It's like, what was the person doing before that fed them the customer data that allowed them to build that and to pay attention to everything that's happening on the field?
Love that. I mean, that's something that I love to be able to admire. And I see, in our accounting, in our recognition programs, whatever, in a lot of organizations, that person often doesn't get recognized because they aren't the ones that made the big sale. They're the one that contributed along the way, that clicked it over, that put it over the top, that said, oh, well, we need to make this small tweak to our presentation, and that's what's going to make the difference, and the sale happened. That person is pivotal. That person is making an impact. And I believe when we do that as leaders, man, everything gets healthier, because one of the things that I'm passionate about is I believe that as, the generation I'm in, and here in this, Gen X, millennial, cusp, is it's our job to be the bridge. And that was another word that I really believed impact players are bridges. They're bridges to everyone else in the organization that collaborated, that bridge that makes things happen. And if we can be healthier, if we can understand the concepts that you're talking about in all 3 of your books, and really this impact player, be an impact player, help others be impact players, we're creating healthier organizations.
When you said bridge, it just reminded me of, it's an example in the book, and it's a personal one for me. It's J. Bonner Ritchie.
Yeah.
And it's towards
Such
the end
a great
of the book.
story.
So someone's got to read a little bit or skip right to it. But it was this professor of mine, and he was invited to be a visiting faculty at BYU, where I went to school, at the Jerusalem Center. And, he's out he's coming home from a days of meeting, and he's driving through this village, this Palestinian village of Isawiya, but he's driving in a car with Israeli plates. And the local boys in the village start throwing stones at his car, and they end up breaking the windows, and he's very much in danger. Throws it in reverse, ends up backing up a hill. I was just there this summer, backing up a hill, went to the hospital, and had 30 pieces of glass in his face and in his arm. A day after this, J. Bonner Ritchie, who is a master at managing ambiguity and perspective taking, he goes back to the village, all bandaged up. This time he takes a translator. He leaves his car at the border, because this is sort of the Israeli part of town and going into this Palestinian village. And he asks the boys, why? Why did you do this? He finds the mayor and says, I'd like to talk to the boys. These boys think they're in big trouble. And he just says, I want to know why. And he just lets them teach him why they did this to him and his car. And they said it was the Israeli plates. And for them, they said, here's what that symbol means to us. And it's a very different perspective than it would be from the Israeli perspective or the American perspective or a European perspective. But he just soaked in their perspective. And then he goes about his way. They become friends. They visit him up at the center. Bonner goes on to conduct these workshops, these leadership workshops with Israelis and Palestinians. He ends up leaving, and then maybe within a year he gets a call, and it's someone from Yasser Arafat's cabinet, the leader of the Palestinian Liberation, or PLO. And he's been summoned back to the Middle East and to Tunisia, to PLO headquarters, to meet with Arafat. And when he gets taken through tunnels and blindfolded and everything, he meets Arafat. Arafat says, I want to talk with you because you have a reputation as a bridge builder. And you're someone who doesn't take sides. You're someone who can see both sides of things. And Arafat had been given this opportunity to enter into peace talks with the Israeli prime minister. And this is back in 1993, I believe. And Arafat says to him, there's, I don't know how many people were there on his cabinet. It's more than a dozen people on his cabinet. And he said, we've been given this opportunity, but more than half of my cabinet is vehemently opposed to the idea of peace with Israel. And could you come spend 3 days with us and help open their eyes to the possibility of peace? And he did. And Arafat is then able to go and enter into what becomes the Oslo Peace Accord of 93. And, it was just like this idea that he was there to build bridges. And to build bridges, you have to understand both sides. And then be that bridge, which is a service between two sides. Like, to me, this is what an impact player does and is someone who makes a huge difference in the world. Now, obviously, there are many, many people and parties that did work that made that peace agreement possible. But, it's empathy, it's seeing, it's understanding, it's getting out of yourself and not saying, I want to tell them why they're wrong. Well, let me just understand what they see. What's life like for them? What's their lived experience?
Our greatest opportunity, I believe, today in leadership in society is to be a bridge that does not have pylons on each side, which limit who can go across. You think about that. Imagine you're at a bridge, you're somewhere, and there's gates or there's pylons that, it's only foot traffic or bicycle traffic. The more that bridge is open and is built and structured to carry whatever across it, that's when that's going to happen. And to me, and I'm so glad you brought up that story. It was a note that I had. That is the epitome of saying it's not about me, but I can make an impact, but I have to be willing to understand why. Going back to what you said earlier, the impact players find a way to understand what's really important and use that as a catalyst to make more, to go 1 + 1 = 4. Liz, thank you so much for your time. We could continue on. We could talk as long as we just spoke about that whole last little piece. So I'm going to leave that people wanting more. And I thank you so much for your time. This has been an absolute treasure and joy.
Well, Tyler, thank you. And thank you for building bridges and helping leaders to do the same, because we need it right now.
So I want to share this, as I was impacted by this book. As part of the Impact Driven Leader, we host a book club, and I'm excited for your book to be our book for the month of February. So thank you so much for that, and I'm excited, and thank you again for your time.
Well, thank you for sharing it, and I hope it does help people really become difference makers and not just position holders inside organizations.
Love that piece. Love that.